Stories, they laughed at him, not knowing the undercover CEO was testing them. And have you ever wondered if the people around you truly care about you, or just what you can offer them? It's a question that gnawed at my soul, pushing me to take an extraordinary step. If you lost everything tomorrow, who do you think would still be by your side? I decided not to wait to find out. I became a beggar to learn the truth, and the truth was shocking. For 72 years, I, Theron Valerius, have built an empire from nothing. Luminar Innovations, my life's work, isn't just a tech conglomerate, it's a beacon of sustainable solutions, a philanthropic titan dedicated to global aid. Billions flow through my hands, yet in recent years, a chilling emptiness had begun to settle in my heart. I had cultivated a life of immense privilege, surrounded by people who seemingly admired and respected me, but the warmth I once felt from their presence had slowly turned into a cold, calculating draft. My sprawling estate, once a vibrant hub of family and business, now felt like a gilded cage, isolating me more with each passing year. I looked at the faces around me, my executives, even some members of my own family, and saw not passion, but ambition, not empathy, but calculation. There was a subtle shift in their gazes, from genuine connection to a hungry assessment of what my wealth could provide. It was a subtle, insidious change, but it seeped into every interaction, every casual conversation. My legacy, painstakingly crafted to uplift humanity, was slowly being consumed by a pervasive materialism, a cold indifference to the very people it was supposed to serve. It gnawed at me. How could I ensure my life's work would continue its true mission after I was gone? How could I finalize my succession plans, entrusting my vast fortune and my vision to hands that might ultimately betray its very spirit? This question, a persistent whisper in the quiet corridors of my sprawling estate, demanded an answer. And I knew there was only one way to truly find it: I had to disappear. I had to become nobody. Why would a man with millions pretend to be homeless? The answer was simple, yet profoundly complex. I needed to see beyond the polished smiles and the feigned deference. I needed to peel back the layers of pretense that wealth and power inevitably create. My disillusionment wasn't a sudden onset, it was a slow, creeping realization, like a hairline crack appearing in a magnificent facade. I had watched as compassion became a corporate talking point, a bullet point on a quarterly report, as genuine human connection was replaced by networking opportunities. The very concept of charity had mutated into strategic philanthropy, where impact was measured in PR value rather than genuine human betterment. My own Valerius Benevolence Fund, established with the purest intentions to provide grants and aid to those in desperate need, had, by all accounts, become another cog in the corporate machine, efficient, perhaps, but devoid of soul. Rumors of executive callousness, of applicants being treated like numbers, of a chilling detachment from the very plight they were meant to alleviate, had reached my ears, filtered through the layers of management. These whispers came from lower-level employees, from frustrated aid workers, even from a few brave, disillusioned board members who had seen the creeping rot. But I am a man who trusts only what he sees, what he experiences. So, I devised a plan, a final, audacious test of character. I would strip away my identity, my wealth, my power, and present myself as the very kind of person my company was supposedly designed to help. I would become Silas Finch. The transformation into Silas Finch was not merely a matter of changing clothes, it was a profound physical and psychological metamorphosis. I spent weeks preparing, not just learning to move with a different gait, to speak with a different cadence, but to feel different. My tailor, a man who had dressed me for decades, was sworn to secrecy, tasked with creating clothes that were worn, yet not truly dirty, that hinted at hardship without screaming destitution. I shed my expensive leather shoes for scuffed, uncomfortable boots. My carefully styled silver hair was dulled, allowed to become slightly disheveled. I practiced softening my gaze, letting the lines of worry and fatigue etch themselves onto my face, rather than the sharp resolve of a CEO. My hands, usually accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, would tremble slightly as Silas clutched a tattered folder. My voice, once resonant with authority, would be hesitant, almost apologetic, the careful modulation of a man used to being ignored. I walked the streets of unfamiliar neighborhoods, observing, listening, absorbing the quiet dignity and unspoken struggles of those who lived on the margins. I practiced sleeping on park benches, enduring the cold, the hunger, the gnawing anxiety of uncertainty. Each discomfort was a lesson, each chill a reminder of the world I was about to enter, a world where my name, Theron Valerius, held no sway. The biggest challenge was quieting the inherent authority within me, the instinct to command, to solve, to lead. I had to become truly anonymous, truly vulnerable. I chose the Valerius Benevolence Fund as my ground zero, the very heart of my philanthropic efforts, because if the rot had set in there, it had permeated my entire organization. My goal was simple, to seek a modest grant, something small enough to be dismissed, yet significant enough to test the humanity of those in charge. I wanted to see if the spirit of genuine service still flickered within my own foundation, or if it had been extinguished by the cold winds of ambition. My family, my executives, they knew nothing. They believed I was on one of my increasingly frequent solitary retreats, planning my succession in quiet contemplation. But contemplation, for me, was action. And my action would soon expose the truth. So, how did my greedy executives treat the poor old man? The journey began on a Tuesday, a day I will forever remember for its stark revelations. I arrived at the grand, imposing building that housed the Valerius Benevolence Fund, a building I had personally designed to be a sanctuary of hope, a testament to humanity's potential. Its facade of gleaming glass and polished granite usually filled me with pride. As Silas Finch, I shuffled through the revolving doors, my worn coat feeling heavier than usual, a stark contrast to my deliberately disheveled appearance. The security guard, a young man I had never seen before, barely spared me a glance, his eyes sliding past me as if I were a ghost. I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, following the signs for public outreach, my worn boots squeaking faintly on the polished marble floors. Each step was a deliberate act, my breath held, my heart a strange mix of apprehension and grim determination. The waiting area was clinical. Rows of ergonomically designed chairs, a muted color scheme of grays and blues, and an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of papers or the low hum of the air conditioning. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like a high-end dentist's office, devoid of any warmth. There were others, of course, fellow applicants, their faces etched with varying degrees of hope and despair. A young mother clutched a child to her chest, whispering reassurances. An elderly couple sat hand in hand, their gazes fixed on the entrance to the inner offices. I saw the quiet desperation in their eyes, the nervous fidgeting, the way they clutched their worn folders of documents. In that moment, I felt invisible, just another statistic waiting to be processed, a number on a long list. And that, I realized, was exactly the point. This was how they saw everyone, not as individuals, but as cases to be managed, resources to be allocated, or, more often, problems to be dismissed. After an hour of waiting, during which I watched several well-dressed individuals breeze through, seemingly without appointments, a stern-faced woman with tightly pulled-back hair finally called my number. Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection. I approached the counter, my fabricated story rehearsed, my voice deliberately wavering, a touch of desperation in my tone. I presented my humble request, a small grant to replace an antiquated well pump in a struggling rural community, a project I had meticulously researched to appear genuine yet inconsequential to a large fund. I spoke of the dignity of self-sufficiency, of the children who missed school because they had to fetch water from miles away. The woman behind the counter, however, barely made eye contact. Her eyes, cool and dismissive, seemed to glide over me, not seeing a human being, but a problem, an inconvenience. She gestured with a pen towards a further waiting room, a smaller, even less inviting space, filled with a stale, institutional scent. "Wait there," she mumbled, already turning to the next number. The hours stretched. My back ached from the unyielding chairs. My stomach rumbled, a painful reminder of the simple sustenance I had foregone. I observed. Others, better dressed, seemingly more articulate, were seen with more haste, their applications handled with a different, almost deferential tone. The Zygarnik effect was in full play, every unanswered question about my fate, every delay, heightened my internal tension, reinforcing my hypothesis about the organization. This was not the fund I had envisioned. This was a bureaucratic fortress, designed to keep people out as much as to let aid in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, past the point where my patience would normally snap, I was ushered into a small, sterile office. Serafina Thorne, the director of the Valerius Benevolence Fund, sat behind a gleaming desk, her posture rigidly upright, her expression one of barely concealed impatience. Her expensive suit was immaculate, her hair perfectly coiffed, a stark contrast to my rumpled appearance. Beside her, perched on the edge of a chair like a preening raven, was Blaine Corvus, her sycophantic aide, whose perpetual smirk seemed permanently etched onto his face. He held a tablet, occasionally glancing at it, chuckling softly at something only he could see, a private joke shared only with his own smugness. Silas Finch, Serafina stated, her voice devoid of warmth, echoing the coldness of the room. Your application for the well pump. It's unusually small. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air like a condescending fog. We typically deal with projects of a much grander scale. This fund is not for petty repairs, Mr. Finch. It's for systemic change. Blaine snickered, a low, guttural sound, his eyes flicking to Serafina for approval, which she granted with a brief, almost imperceptible nod. I began to explain, humbly, the profound impact even a small, functional well could have on a community desperate for clean water, how it could prevent disease and allow children to attend school instead of fetching water from miles away. I spoke of the dignity of self-sufficiency, of the ripple effect of clean water on health, education, and economic stability. My words, chosen carefully to convey both urgency and humility, seemed to fall on deaf ears, bouncing off the polished surfaces of their indifference. Look, Mr. Finch, Serafina interrupted, waving a dismissive hand, adorned with a large, sparkling ring. We have literally thousands of applications. Our resources are finite. We can't be funding every broken faucet or leaky pipe. You're a drain on resources that could be allocated to truly impactful initiatives. Her eyes flicked to Blaine, who nodded vigorously, his smirk widening into a full, self-satisfied grin. Indeed, Blaine chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension, a thin veneer of false politeness barely concealing his contempt. Frankly, Silas, you look like you need a grant for new clothes more than a well pump. Are you even sure you're capable of overseeing such a project? Or are you just another one of the hopeful, yet ultimately hopeless, cases seeking a handout? He laughed openly, a harsh, grating sound, a sound that grated on my very soul. My heart, as Theron, ached. Not for myself, for Silas, but for the countless others who must have endured this same, dehumanizing treatment. I pictured the young mother, the elderly couple, all subjected to this cold, analytical dismissal. I looked at Serafina's cold, calculating eyes, at Blaine's sneering face, and a cold fury began to simmer beneath my worn exterior. They had no idea who they were speaking to. They saw only a disheveled old man, easily dismissed, easily mocked. They had failed the test spectacularly. My curiosity was no longer about if they would fail, but how spectacularly they would unravel when the truth was revealed. As Serafina gestured towards the door, effectively dismissing me, her gaze already drifting to the next folder on her desk, I rose slowly, feigning a slight stumble. My eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of my true self, a hint of the steel that had built an empire, showed through my carefully constructed facade. She flinched, almost imperceptibly, a momentary crack in her glacial composure, then quickly recovered her professional mask. Next, she barked, turning her attention to the papers on her desk, already moving on. I left their office, the weight of their disdain heavy on my shoulders, but my resolve hardened. My plan, it seemed, was working precisely as intended, albeit with a more bitter taste than I had anticipated. The air in the main waiting area felt stifling, charged with the unspoken anxieties of those still waiting. I shuffled back to the general waiting area, feigning weariness, and slumped into a chair, trying to blend into the background, watching the comings and goings, my mind already formulating the next steps of my grand design. I considered my next move. Perhaps I would simply leave, let their dismissal be the final verdict, and then unleash the full force of my authority. But something made me linger, a flicker of hope, or perhaps just the sheer exhaustion. It was then, in that moment of profound disappointment, when cynicism threatened to fully engulf me, that a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with kind, earnest eyes that held a genuine spark of human warmth. She stood beside my chair, a quiet presence in the sterile room. She held a warm, steaming mug in one hand and a wrapped protein bar in the other. Her name tag, pinned neatly to her simple blouse, read Ilara Vance, intern. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice soft and genuinely solicitous, not the practiced polite tone of the other staff, but truly empathetic. "I couldn't help but notice you've been here for quite some time. You look a little tired. Would you like some tea? And perhaps a little something to eat?" My first instinct was to refuse, to maintain the facade of Silas, to avoid any interaction that might compromise my mission. But her eyes, unlike Seraphina's, held no judgment, only concern. No calculation, no agenda. Just simple, unadulterated kindness. "Thank you, young lady," I rasped, accepting the mug. The warmth spread through my chilled hands, a small act of kindness in a vast, cold sea of indifference. The protein bar, simple as it was, felt like a feast. She pulled up a chair, not directly in front of me, which might have felt confrontational, but slightly to the side, creating an intimate, non-threatening space. "I'm Ilara," she offered, a small, encouraging smile on her face. "Is everything all right?" I overheard a little bit from down the hall. She didn't explicitly mention Seraphina or Blaine, but her subtle implication was clear. She knew. She had witnessed, or at least intuited, the callous dismissal I had just endured. I launched into my fabricated story again, slightly embellished this time, detailing the urgent need for the well pump, the community's plight, my own humble circumstances, the small sums I had tried to raise, the desperation of the villagers. I watched her face as I spoke. She didn't interrupt. She didn't dismiss. She didn't check her watch or glance at a tablet. She listened. Truly listened. Her brow furrowed with genuine concern, her eyes reflecting the empathy that was so conspicuously absent from Seraphina and Blaine. She asked clarifying questions, not to challenge me, but to understand. "That's terrible," she murmured when I finished, her voice laced with genuine sadness. "It sounds like a truly vital project. I'm so sorry you weren't given the attention you deserved. It's not right." She paused, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice, a hint of nervousness in her eyes, yet her resolve remained. It was clear she was taking a risk. "Look, officially, I'm just an intern, but I know some of our internal processes. Sometimes, smaller grants get overlooked or are considered outside the scope of Director Thorne's current initiatives. It's a rigid system." She glanced furtively towards the main office corridor, as if fearing being overheard. "But there are other avenues. Have you considered applying to the Community Empowerment Microgrant Program? It's much smaller, yes, but it's specifically designed for grassroots projects like the one you're describing. And the application process is much simpler, more direct, less bureaucratic." She then pulled out a small notepad and a pen, swiftly scribbling down a website address and a contact number, a direct line to a different department within the fund, one that Seraphina and Blaine had explicitly neglected to mention to me. "And," she added, tearing off the sheet and handing it to me, "There's also a local community foundation that partners with us on some projects. They're much more focused on individual needs, less on the grand-scale impact Serafina talks about. I can give you their contact too, if you like." She didn't just offer sympathy, she offered tangible solutions that Serafina and Blaine had consciously withheld, deliberately keeping these lifelines from those they deemed unworthy. My heart swelled. This young intern, earning barely a pittance, risking her own standing within the organization by subtly undermining her superiors, embodied the very spirit I had intended for my foundation. She saw not a statistic, but a human being in need. She saw an opportunity to genuinely help, even if it meant going against the prevailing coldness of the institution. My disappointment began to recede, replaced by a nascent hope. The test, it seemed, had found its true subject. My curiosity now shifted from the downfall of the callous to the elevation of the kind. The stage was set, and the players had, unknowingly, chosen their roles. The Zygarnik effect now focused on the inevitable conclusion, the moment when the tables would be dramatically turned. But every game has an end, right? The following Monday, the air crackled with anticipation within the sleek, modern confines of the Luminar Innovations headquarters. It was the day of the quarterly Board of Directors meeting, a critical juncture where not only the financial performance of Luminar was scrutinized, but also the strategic direction of its various subsidiaries, including, pointedly, the Valerius Benevolence Fund. And, perhaps most significantly, it was rumored that I, Theron Valerius, was finally preparing to outline my definitive succession plan. The tension was palpable, a mixture of corporate ambition and hushed speculation. Serafina Thorne, impeccably dressed in a sharp power suit, her face a mask of confident professionalism, bustled around the boardroom. She was checking the projectors, adjusting the water glasses, perfecting every minute detail of her presentation. Blaine Corvus, equally dapper, hovered at her side, whispering obsequious remarks, his smirk as ingrained as ever, as she reviewed her presentation slides. They were scheduled to deliver their report on the benevolence funds, optimized efficiency, and streamlined processes, metrics they believed would impress the board and solidify their positions, perhaps even earn them a promotion. They were oblivious, utterly oblivious, to the storm brewing on the horizon, to the meticulously laid trap I had set. My legal team had ensured certain agenda items were strategically placed, creating the perfect stage for the revelation. The boardroom was packed. Senior executives, long-serving board members, even a few of my more distant family members, all sat around the vast mahogany table, their gazes fixed on the entrance, a mixture of expectation and boredom on their faces. The usual polite chatter died down to a murmur, then an expectant hush, as the large, double doors at the far end of the room swung open. And then I entered. I wasn't Silas Finch. I was Theron Valerius. My silver hair was meticulously combed, each strand in place, catching the light. My bespoke suit, tailored to perfection, hung flawlessly on my frame, exuding an aura of quiet authority that permeated the very air around me. My stride was firm, purposeful, each step resonating with the power I had carefully set aside for my experiment. I was flanked not by my usual executive assistant, but by Marcus, my most trusted legal counsel, a man whose face held the knowing calm of someone fully aware of the impending drama, and an additional security detail, their presence a subtle but undeniable statement. A profound hush fell over the room, an almost palpable sense of awe and expectation. Heads turned. Whispers erupted, quickly dying down to strained silence. Serafina and Blaine, who had been confidently adjusting their presentation, sharing a private joke, froze. Their faces, moments ago alight with self-importance, slowly drained of color, as if the blood had suddenly rushed from them. I walked directly to the head of the table, my eyes sweeping over every face, lingering for a fraction of a second on Serafina and Blaine. Their smug expressions had vanished, replaced by a dawning horror, a slow, creeping realization that something was terribly wrong. They seemed to shrink in their seats, their previous confidence evaporating like mist in the morning sun. I settled into my chair, my gaze still fixed on them, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. The silence was deafening, charged with unspoken questions. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice clear and resonant, filling the expansive room, cutting through the thick tension. "Before we delve into the quarterly reports, I have a personal matter to address, one that profoundly impacts the very soul of this company and its future. It is a matter of character, a matter of principle, and ultimately, a matter of my legacy." Serafina's eyes darted nervously between me and Blaine, as if seeking an answer or an escape. Blaine shifted uncomfortably, running a finger around his collar, his previous confidence evaporating like mist on a hot day. The Zygarnik effect was now intensely focused on their impending doom. They knew something was wrong, terribly wrong, but they couldn't possibly fathom the depth of their predicament, the true nature of the trap I had laid. "As many of you know," I continued, my voice measured, resonating with a quiet authority, "I have been contemplating the future of Luminar Innovations and, indeed, my own legacy. I've spent considerable time reflecting on the values that define us, the principles upon which this empire was built, innovation, yes, but also compassion, integrity, and genuine service to humanity. These are not just words on a mission statement, they are the bedrock of everything we claim to stand for." My gaze sharpened as it landed squarely on Serafina. "But sometimes, to truly understand if those values still resonate within our walls, if they are truly alive and breathing in our day-to-day operations, one must step outside the gilded cage. One must see things from a different perspective." Serafina's jaw tightened, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Blaine's eyes were wide with a growing panic, a sickly sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. "For the past week," I announced, my voice rising slightly, clear and unyielding, "I have not been Theron Valerius. I have been Silas Finch." A collective gasp rippled through the boardroom, a wave of stunned disbelief. Murmurs erupted, then quickly subsided as everyone strained to hear my next words, their eyes fixed on me, then darting to Serafina and Blaine. Serafina's face went chalk-white, all color draining from it. Blaine actually whimpered, a small, pathetic sound, like a cornered animal. They looked at each other, then back at me, their faces a mixture of disbelief and utter terror, as if a ghost had just walked into the room. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place, the horrifying picture forming before their eyes. The memory of the disheveled old man they had so callously dismissed must have flooded their minds. "Yes," I confirmed, letting the revelation sink in, allowing them to fully grasp the magnitude of their mistake. Silas Finch. A frail, disheveled old man seeking a modest grant from our own Valerius Benevolence Fund. A grant for a simple well pump in a struggling rural community. A project so small, so inconsequential, that it was deemed a drain on resources by the very individuals tasked with overseeing our philanthropic endeavors. My voice grew colder, sharper, each word a precisely aimed dart, piercing their carefully constructed facade. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, my eyes boring into Serafina and Blaine, holding their terrified gazes. "I spent hours in your waiting room, Serafina. I was dismissed by your staff, treated like an inconvenience, a nuisance to be quickly dispatched. And when I finally gained an audience with you and Mr. Corvus," I paused, letting my gaze sweep over Blaine, seeing his shudder, "I was met with condescension, with mockery, with open ridicule. I was told I was another one of the hopeless cases. I was told I needed new clothes more than a well pump. You dismissed my humble plea for clean water as a petty repair, unworthy of this grand fund, unworthy of your attention." Serafina's lips trembled, her composure utterly shattered. Blaine was visibly shaking, his head bowed, unable to meet my gaze. They tried to speak, to stammer out an excuse, a justification, but no words came, choked by fear and the crushing weight of their discovery. "But here is the truly illuminating part," I continued, my voice regaining its quiet authority, yet laced with a palpable disappointment that cut deeper than any anger. "While I, as Silas Finch, was being callously dismissed and ridiculed by the very individuals entrusted with upholding Luminar's values, a young intern, Ms. Alara Vance. I paused and gestured towards a young woman sitting quietly amongst the junior staff, her eyes wide with shock and a growing understanding, approached me. She saw not a burden, not a statistic, but a human being. She offered a warm cup of tea, a protein bar, a simple gesture of kindness in a world that had become so cold. She listened with genuine empathy. She offered compassionate advice, and, critically, provided resources that you, Director Thorne, and you, Mr. Corvus, had explicitly denied or failed to mention, perhaps deliberately so. The silence that followed was absolute, a heavy blanket of realization. Everyone in the room looked from me to Serafina and Blaine, then to a stunned Alara, her face a mixture of disbelief and quiet humility. The truth, ugly and undeniable, hung in the air, exposed for all to see. This was not just a test, it was a judgment, and the verdict was clear. This is not just about a well pump, I stated, my voice now firm and unwavering, resonating with the full force of my conviction. This is about the soul of Luminar Innovations. It is about the promise we make to the world, the trust our name implies. It is about the character of those who manage my legacy, those who represent everything I have built. And I have seen, firsthand, that character today. You, I said, pointing directly at Serafina, then at Blaine, my finger a clear, unshakable accusation, have failed spectacularly. The climax had been reached, the truth laid bare, and now, the consequences were inevitable, waiting to unfold. The fallout was immediate, brutal, and entirely deserved. My words hung in the air, thick with their gravity, silencing even the most seasoned board members. Serafina Thorne and Blaine Corvus were frozen in their seats, their faces etched with a ghastly blend of fear, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. The moment I finished speaking, Marcus, my legal counsel, stepped forward, his voice crisp, official, and utterly devoid of mercy. Effective immediately, Marcus announced, his voice ringing through the silent room, Ms. Serafina Thorne and Mr. Blaine Corvus are terminated from their positions at the Valerius Benevolence Fund and Luminar Innovations. All company assets, access, and privileges are hereby revoked. Furthermore, an immediate and comprehensive audit of all past grant applications and fund allocations will commence, with a particular focus on any potential misconduct, negligence, or systemic bias that may have occurred under their leadership. Serafina let out a small, choked gasp. Her perfectly composed facade shattered, revealing a raw, desperate fear. Mr. Valerius, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking, her hands trembling. It was a misunderstanding. We had protocols. High volume. We were just following policy. Blaine, meanwhile, had slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, his previous swagger utterly gone. No, please, sir, my career. I can explain. His words were muffled, pathetic. I merely raised a hand, a silent gesture that silenced their desperate pleas. Protocols should serve humanity, not supersede it, Serafina. And true leadership isn't just about efficiency, it's about empathy, about seeing the human behind the application. Something you both clearly lack, and something that has corroded the very heart of this foundation. The security detail, which had been standing unobtrusively by the door, now moved towards Serafina and Blaine. Their badges were confiscated, their company phones taken. Their colleagues, moments ago sharing pleasantries with them, now averted their gazes, uncomfortable witnesses to their swift, public downfall. No one offered a word of comfort or solidarity. They were escorted out of the boardroom, their every step a testament to their ruined careers, their reputations irrevocably tarnished. Their once lofty positions had vanished in a puff of smoke, leaving behind only the bitter taste of public humiliation and professional ruin. I heard later that the audit uncovered multiple instances of mismanaged funds and systematic neglect of smaller, impactful projects, and even a few cases of outright fraud, further cementing their fate. Their names became bywords for corporate callousness, their futures bleak and barren. They would struggle to find employment in their field again. Then, I turned my attention to Elara Vance. She sat wide-eyed, trembling slightly, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden, dramatic turn of events. "Ms. Vance," I said, my voice softening considerably, a stark contrast to the severity with which I had just addressed her superiors, "please approach the table." She rose hesitantly, her eyes fixed on me, a mixture of awe and trepidation in their depths. As she stood before the board, a young, earnest figure amidst seasoned executives, I extended my hand. "Elara, your actions yesterday, your genuine kindness and your unwavering commitment to our true mission, restored my faith. You embodied the very spirit upon which Luminar Innovations was founded, the spirit of true benevolence, of selfless service, of seeing humanity where others saw only numbers." Her eyes welled up, tears beginning to stream down her face. "Sir. I just wanted to help. It felt like the right thing to do." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And that, Elara," I said, a warm smile gracing my lips, a genuine smile I hadn't felt in weeks, "is precisely why you are worthy of leading. Effective immediately, Ms. Elara Vance, you are appointed as the interim director of the Valerius Benevolence Fund, with a mandate to completely restructure its operations, ensuring that empathy and genuine service are prioritized above all else. Your salary will be commensurate with this significant responsibility, and you will have full autonomy to implement your vision, to bring humanity back to its core. Furthermore," I continued, gesturing to Marcus, who placed a thick document on the table, "I have established a substantial endowment, personally overseen by you, to fund grassroots projects like the one Silas Finch presented, projects that make a real difference, no matter how small they appear to others. This is not just a job, Elara, it is a trust. A trust in your character, your compassion, and your unwavering belief in humanity." Elara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming emotion. Tears streamed down her face, tears of shock, gratitude, and perhaps a little fear of the immense responsibility now placed upon her. "Mr. Valerius. I don't know what to say. She was speechless, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the reward, the sudden shift in her entire life's trajectory. It was clear she had expected nothing, and now, everything had been given. Her humility in the face of such a profound reward only further affirmed my decision. She had no ulterior motives, no hidden agenda, simply a pure desire to help. The contrast between her reaction and that of Serafina and Blaine was a profound affirmation of my entire test, the purest vindication of my audacious plan. So what happened to them all? Serafina Thorne and Blaine Corvus vanished from the corporate landscape as quickly as they were exposed. Their names became cautionary tales whispered in boardrooms across the city, a stark reminder of the price of arrogance and cruelty. Their carefully constructed lives, built on a foundation of pretense and ambition, crumbled under the weight of their own indifference. They were left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret and the knowledge that they had squandered a rare opportunity, not just for financial gain, but for genuine impact, for meaning. I heard through various channels that they struggled to find work, their reputation preceding them like a dark shadow, their professional networks collapsing around them. Their downfall was complete, and entirely deserved. Elara Vance, on the other hand, flourished. She embraced her new role with a quiet determination and an infectious passion that inspired everyone around her. Under her compassionate leadership, the Valerius Benevolence Fund was truly transformed. She dismantled the bureaucratic barriers, streamlined the application process with a human touch, and empowered her team to genuinely connect with applicants, to see their struggles and their dignity. Small, impactful projects, once dismissed, were now actively sought out and funded. The fund's reputation soared, becoming a true beacon of hope and generosity, a testament to the power of genuine empathy. Elara's story, too, became an inspiration, a quiet affirmation that kindness, even in the smallest gestures, can lead to the most profound changes. Seeing her thrive, knowing my legacy was truly in the hands of someone who understood its core purpose, someone who saw humanity first, brought me a peace of mind I hadn't felt in years. My succession plans were finalized, not based on bloodline or corporate hierarchy, but on tested, proven character, revealed in the most unexpected way. I learned my lesson about human nature. Our channel is full of stories like this. The greatest wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the depths of our character. True character is revealed in how we treat those who can do nothing for us, those from whom we expect no reward. It is in the quiet acts of kindness, the genuine listening, the empathy extended when there is no benefit to be gained, that the true measure of a person is found. My life's work, my legacy, now stands on a foundation of compassion, thanks to one kind in turn and a test that revealed the shocking truth. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story of deception and revelation. Have you ever been surprised by someone's true colors? Tell me your story in the comments below.